Trans people are obviously at a specific risk for violence, and it's not a fun time to be an American. It feels increasingly dangerous, and it's not just in America, though. Brianna Jai died. She was stabbed to death in the UK a couple of months ago. You think, oh, yeah, it's like safer in the UK, right? Because they don't have guns. But no, you can be stabbed to death in daytime. It was daylight. This teenager got stabbed to death in the UK in a public park. And that's horrendous and awful. And she was 16 years old. And now we have a somewhat similar situation in the US, where a teenager in South Carolina went on a date and just never came home, and then their body was found later. We have a gay website that doesn't dead name. A fucking men. So South Carolina trans teen killed. He met a man for a date, and that man has been charged with his murder. Jacob Williamson, found dead Tuesday, 4 days after he left his home for a date with a man he met online. So this young trans man is 18 years old, found dead in South Carolina. He left his home in Lawrence, South Carolina, the evening of June 30th, Charlotte, North Carolina. So he lived in North Carolina, was found dead in South Carolina. He said goodbye to Promise Edwards, who is I believe a family friend who took Jacob into her home because Jacob was rejected by members of his family for being trans. So he was in a particularly vulnerable occasion in his life. When you're trans and you're dealing with rejection from your family, you're going to seek affirmation from people who are not always going to be healthy for you. And you're going to be willing to put yourself in situations that are risky because your self-worth is at a very low place when you're being rejected by your family members. So, being rejected for being trans, it does not just represent risk directly associated with being trans. There's also other risks of now because of the complex social rejection aspect of losing your family, okay, well, now you're gonna be seeking housing, and thankfully he had somewhere to go. But sometimes people are gonna be like, okay, well, I'm just gonna be homeless now. And then if someone's like, hey, youngin', I'll give you a place to stay in exchange for, and then you're like, okay, well, now I'm doing sex work in order to have a roof over my head, or for a meal, and then you're in compromised situations, and that's when it becomes dangerous, right? So it's, I think, unclear at the time whether this was targeted, specifically having anything to do with Jacob and being trans, but Joshua Newton of Monroe, North Carolina, who apparently Williamson had begun an online relationship with, picked Jacob up in Lawrence, allegedly for a date at an amusement park. So Newton ended up driving Williamson back to Monroe, and police say Williamson was killed in a house there. His body was found Tuesday along a road in Pageland, South Carolina, just over the state line from Monroe. Media reports have not said how he was killed. So this is the thing. We're going to have to keep an eye on this story and see if anything else happens. I haven't seen very many people posting about this. We'll have to see what information gets revealed, because that's going to very much affect our view of this thing. Okay, was Jacob raped and then killed? Or was Jacob stabbed to death? Was it a crime of passion? Was this a setup? Was this whole thing intended to victimize Jacob? Or did something just happen? And I don't know, was he presenting himself as a male and then they found out that he was female assigned at birth and then killed him because of that? We don't know. Reports have not said how he was killed or what the circumstances were. But police have arrested Newton, who's age 25. This is another thing. If you're 18 years old, oh my God, why are you dating a 25-year-old? Stop it. Just don't. Oh my God, no, this is terrible. But Newton, age 25, and his girlfriend. So yeah, I guess maybe there was an alleged polyamorous situation or whatever, but his girlfriend, Victoria Smith, age 22, have both been arrested and they're being charged. So the man is being charged with first-degree murder and obstruction of justice. And the girlfriend is being charged with obstruction of justice and being an accessory after the fact, helping cover up the murder after the fact. Motive is still being determined, and the the police say it does not appear that Williamson was specifically targeted because of his gender identity. And of course they misgendered. Like, I don't trust you if you can't gender someone correctly during the case investigation. Like, when you've had contact with his friends, you know that he's called Jacob, you know that he uses he, him. Like, of course, the police always say that, right? Yeah. And of course, the family friend, Promise Edwards, is heartbroken. She's like, this world was so cruel to Jacob. She cautioned against meeting up with strangers, saying parents should warn their children about these dangers, express to them how unsafe it is to go with people online, how unsafe it is to get in the car with somebody you don't know. Yeah, it's not good. Williamson and Chanel Perez Ortiz of Puerto Rico are the 13th and 14th trans people known to have died by violence in the US this year. This is also not the narrative that we're accustomed to. We're not accustomed to white assigned female trans people getting killed like this. Like, this doesn't happen super often as far as, like, who is likely to get hate crimed. You know, trans men have one of the highest rates of sexual assault and rape against them, like, more so than most other groups. Like, assigned female people who are, like, non-binary, they get the sexual assault the worst. But, like, statistically in the United States, murders, usually it's trans women of color. Like, first of all, it's usually, like, of the 20 or so trans people who get killed in America every year, it is typically trans women, and it's usually trans women of color. So it just goes to show that this type of violence, you know, there are certain axes at which things are more dangerous, right? Like, things are more dangerous for trans women in general, but especially, like, and like, black trans men also are at a particular risk in ways that white trans men typically are not. But, like, we're seeing this expansion of violence toward all kinds of different people, and, like, corrective rape. Yeah, I thought of corrective rape when I heard that the girlfriend was involved. Right. Like, who knows what happened here? So let's hope that there's more information, that hopefully there's enough of a trail of maybe conversations between the guy and his girlfriend, like, these disgusting, sad excuses for human beings. Maybe there's some conversation that there's going to be revealed information about why this happened. Like, why did you target this poor young person? Like, why did you do this? Like, these people are obviously awful people, and they deserve, like, every bad thing that can happen to a person up until the moment that they die in excruciating agony, in my personal humble opinion.
Hello, it's July. Thank you to my patrons, especially Tiago Nascimento, Mersh Rolvag, Amanda B., Michelle Frattaroli, Danielle McDonald, Sarah A., Spooky Heather Sylvia, Athiet, Robin Olson, Michelle Winter, Wellington Marcus, Jamie Jam, Past Null Infinity, Desi Quiche, Nova, Suzanne Maynard, Mr. Atheist, Elizabeth Bartell, Sojo, and Kevin Young.